I would like to look at one more image here because I think it's a good example of some color space theory. It's also a good example of something that I think may help you understand a little bit more about what's going on in camera raw as regards color and color spaces. I have this image here, and take a look at the histogram, as should be your first impulse when you open an image. And you can see that I've got some highlight clipping in the red channel. I've overexposed some of the reds a little bit in the brightest highlights. I also have some shadow clipping in the blue channel. Now, if you look down here, you'll see that the image is currently being mapped into sRGB. I did not have my camera set properly, so this has come in as an sRGB image. So I'm just going to change that. Now, I want you to keep an eye on the histogram here as I make the change from sRGB to Adobe RGB. Did you notice this? This highlight spike went lower. There's not as much red clipping when I'm in Adobe RGB as there is in sRGB because Adobe RGB can hold more red. I'm going to change this back here, keep an eye on the histogram again, and you'll see what I'm talking about. Boom, the spike went back up. You also see some shifting down here, some tones shifted back down towards black because Adobe RGB also has room for more blues. So I'm back in sRGB. Now I'm going to do the change to Adobe RGB again. This time I want you to watch right in here. Watch these top 3 petals here on the flower as I make the change to Adobe RGB. Notice right now they're very yellow. So just watch that area right there. And I'm going to change that to Adobe RGB and hit OK. Boom. Do you see that? They just brightened up. And they didn't just brighten up, they turned more orange. And if you think about your color wheel, this should make sense. Adobe RGB has space for some more red in it. That's why we've got less red clipping over here. Some of the red tones that were in here got pulled into the image. So as I added more red to those bright yellow tones, I got more of an orange hue. So this is, again, another example of why Adobe RGB is a better choice here. It's giving me more natural looking color. It's taken that kind of overexposed yellow look and made it a little warmer and a little more red. Let's take a look at something else. I'm going to now switch from Adobe RGB to ProPhoto RGB. Keep an eye on the histogram as I hit the OK button. Wow, looky there. All of my shadow and highlight clipping is gone. And in general, the tones have moved more towards the middle. That's going to give me the latitude to stretch them out more and possibly end up with more contrast. Why then don't I stay in ProPhoto all the time? Well, this is a fine example of ProPhoto working well on this image to recover some highlights and shadow detail that won't fit into Adobe RGB. But in general, taking your colors and mapping them across that big a color space can sometimes produce problems. It can cause a color shift. Your yellows might go more in one direction or another. It can also cause banding in skies or gradients, places where it is having to stretch color across a broader space. So you don't really want to stay in ProPhoto all the time, but it is going to turn out to be good for this image. So again, our rule still holds. We want to stay in Adobe RGB. As you've seen, it's bigger than sRGB, and so I get some more color. But there might be times where a switch to ProPhoto RGB can solve some overexposure problems. But I hope from this you're also taking away something about RAW itself. RAW files are really, really raw. They are open to great levels of interpretation. And it's interesting to me that what Adobe has done is taken my raw data and rather than mapping it into this color space so there's no clipping at all, which they could do, they could say these brightest tones don't go any brighter than that, they have chosen to allow some red clipping and some blue clipping because really it's not going to result in a bright overexposed highlight or anything anywhere. It's just going to result in a little bit of a color shift. So they've decided that's basically an acceptable loss. So if I take this same image and open it up in a different raw converter, I may not see this highlight clipping. There is no inherent correspondence between a particular bit of raw data and where it goes into a particular color space. That's up to the engineers who write the raw converter, and in this case Adobe has chosen to map the image so that there's a little bit of clipping. Here's something interesting. If I go into my camera calibration tab, I can actually change which version of Camera Raw is being used. Camera Raw includes all of its previous versions within it. So here you can see the original 2003 version, the 2010 version, the 2012 version. Watch this highlight area as I switch back to 2003. Boom, did you see that? I've now actually got a little bit of full 3-channel clipping in there. Let me switch that back again to 2012. And now watch this area in here as I switch back to 2003. It went from that nice reddish orange color to a really overly bright yellow color. So In the intervening years, Photoshop has refined their idea of how to convert images from this particular camera, and I think they're doing a better job. They are preserving more detail, they are holding more color. It doesn't look so overly saturated yellow now as compared to how it did with the 2003 converter. And again, take a look at the histogram as I switch from 2003 back to 2012. I've also got less clipping. So yes, a color space is an area that colors are mapped into, but your raw converter may not choose to map them so that they fit perfectly within a color space. Here, Adobe has chosen not to, and I can either live with it or try to make edits to solve these problems if I think they're a problem. For example, I can lower the highlights to pull some of those red tones back in if I deem them a problem. So raw files truly are raw. You can map them into color spaces however you want, and depending on which version of Photoshop you're using or which raw editor you're using, you may see very different results. This is very subjective. It's up to you whether a little bit of red clipping is a problem or not. And as you'll see, when you go to print, you're going to be going into a much smaller color space, so that little bit of red clipping really may not even matter.